This broadcast goes to 11, and we are live. And today we have a very special treat for you. You have sent me your DMs and your emails, and I have listened. I had Digital Hammurabi on my show, and you all said, Digital Hammurabi, those boring Bible people, get us somebody good, get us somebody real, get us somebody exciting. So I did. I searched high and low, and I found the newest, freshest voice in philosophy, the newest guy cornering the market on the intellectual side of YouTube. And he is here today. He calls himself New Stoics. Tim, you want to introduce yourself?
That's great. That's the most praise I've gotten since I started. Yeah, my name is Tim Huggins, and I do the YouTube channel, The New Stoics. And basically, it's kind of taking Stoicism and then looking at modern problems and applying traditional and modern Stoicism to our lives. So
Stoicism for the masses, Stoicism for a YouTube audience. So any idiot can understand it.
Stoicism for 2019, right?
Well, exactly. A lot of the problems that people have, it has a lot to do with, self-reflection and having self-control and all these different things. And nobody in this age really has those things. So I kind of feel like Stoicism really could help a lot of people because
Stoicism fits the problems of now, especially stuff with like narcissism, emotionalism, things like that. You feel it could be
absolutely
useful. All right, so let's start from the beginning though. So how long have you the nuts and bolts first, and then we'll go into the practical usages. How long have you had your channel? It's relatively new, right?
Oh yeah, I've had this channel for 3 months actually. It's pretty recent. I did do a channel before that called Politely Atheist, and it was kind of my attempt at getting into political commentary and getting into the quote unquote skeptic community. I started to make some realizations that it's a very vapid and unintellectual community, and I decided to kind of part ways.
Well, kind of careful now. A lot of those people are Craig's friends now.
We accept that. They're vapid and unintellectual. They're ditzies. Okay, so you are an atheist. That's what I was going to start with. You technically.
No, I mean, I'm an atheist in the academic sense. I would say, I believe there are no gods, and but there's some kinds of gods that are a little bit different, and you kind of have to look at every claim differently. For instance, in Stoicism, they believe in an entity or an essence of the universe called the Logos that pervades everything and instills the right way of being. And that kind of God, if you will, is very difficult for me to say, yeah, that absolutely doesn't exist, because I'm like, I don't know. Does it exist? Like that's a pretty complicated idea. So I don't dismiss just all God claims just by grace of being an atheist. I like to listen to each claim, and I take some claims a lot more serious than others.
Right. With the Logos, there's two schools. There's people who tie the Logos into Christianity, and then there's Neoplatonism, which is like kind of trying to reconcile those ideas. I think that's sort of what Jonathan Pajot does too, isn't it, John? Am I wrong on that?
Yeah, he's kind of a Platonist, I guess. He's from the Greek Orthodox Church, so I know they lean more on the kind of more Plato side, while the Catholics kind of lean a little bit more on the Aristotelian side. So
right, but they're definitely trying to mix those two schools of thought with the Logos and traditional Christianity to some degree, right?
Yeah, I think Saint Augustine was originally a kind of a Gnostic, kind of pagan, that had kind of from that Neoplatonic school of thought where like numbers are and logic are a component of reality, and then from there he kind of took a lot of like his disagreements with that school of thought into kind of branching, going along into, or I guess founding, I guess, more of the traditional Orthodox Church and Christianity from there, I guess.
So Tim, you're not, you're mixed on some potential God claims and you're atheist on others. So you take it as a case by case basis. Is that correct? Is that?
Yeah, for the most part. When I say I'm an atheist, it's typically about the personal God of Yahweh, of some way. I believe that God doesn't exist, but for the most part, it's different interpretations of God require a lot of different thought because people are making different claims. And so, I mean, when somebody talks about, they think a volcano is a god, I kind of just dismiss that. I feel like we have to kind of look at local gods and global gods, and we have to consider each claim. And I am an atheist, but I'm absolutely not an anti-theist. So I take the claims with respect, and I don't just automatically dismiss just based upon what other peers say. So I grew up a Mormon, so I grew up with some really outrageous kind of beliefs. And now that I'm in this position, I have to just kind of take a step back and just listen to what people are actually claiming and evaluate from there.
So you walked away from Mormonism roughly how long ago?
Oh, this is when I was 19. Gosh, you're telling me to count now. That was 16 years ago. I was just getting ready to go on a mission, actually.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Mormon.
Yeah, and it's pretty tight knit community. So I lost a lot of friends, but eventually people just kind of got over it, and I got my friends back, and people, it's not like being a Jehovah's Witness where people will disfellowship you and all that. So it wasn't that bad. I mean, I still love my parents. They're still pretty devout Mormons, and I don't even I don't even bring it up. If I do, I know it's going to be a fight, but I wish I could have that discussion with them because there's so many easy ways that people could see Mormonism is just an outright lie. But you can't just do it in kind of like a new atheist style and just say, oh, your gods are nothing. There's nothing out there, and you're all gonna die, kind of thing. You have to kind of have some nuance and be very step by step, because when people are willing to believe that Native Americans are Jews, they're pretty they're in there pretty deep.
Right. Well, there's a whole bunch of different. I'm assuming that these are more Mormons, because there's a school of Mormons that are somewhat indistinguishable from just like a sort of modernist church group. Like they're sort of Christians for the most part, and they downplay the eccentricities of Mormonism. It sounds like the Mormons that you were part of were bought into the whole eccentricities of Mormonism, like the Joseph Smith and the. I don't know all the details all that well, but it sounds like it's way more committed to the Mormon. Like there's a way of practicing that's almost cult-like and different from Christianity. And there's a way of some Mormons practicing it where it's indistinguishable from Christianity. You wouldn't even know. Like I'm sure Mitt Romney wasn't all that out there, right?
Well, I even the mainstream church is pretty out there, I would say. The whole their biggest idea of you becoming like a god are pretty crazy. They believe that they're polytheists. they believe in multiple gods, and they believe, I don't know, they're pretty bizarre.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they're a pretty bizarre take on Christianity. Their answer for infinite regress with the whole gods creating the planets kind of thing is there was a god before that, and then there was a god before that, and then there was a god before that. It's crazy. It's kind of like you guys didn't even listen to some of the basic theology of Christianity. It's like Christians don't say that. Christians say that God was always existing. Like that's the whole. That's the stop of infinite regress. It's not more infinite regress. That's logically.
Yeah, it's like you participate in the infinite regress. So, well, who invented that god? The god before him. Yeah, who invented that? Well, the god before him.
Yeah.
And then you just keep going until the conversation goes on forever. It's like you become part of it.
It's turtles all the way down.
Yeah. Except gods.
Yes.
So you never had a period where you were involved in atheism as an atheist activist type person? Are you somewhat?
No. I stepped away from. I thought about it at some point. But there's kind of a point where I started to take a step back. That's why I started my Politely Atheist channel, is because I wanted to take a step back and evaluate how people view atheists, and to look at it from a non-theistic, a non-anti-theistic point of view. And because I don't think a lot of atheists, especially new atheists, realize how much people really hate those kind of people. Like they come off as smug and knowing everything. And so I kind of wanted to come off as, a polite atheist who's willing to talk to people and have, pleasant conversations, and, I wouldn't just insult them. And
your end game wasn't necessarily deconverting people per se. It was more just having conversations.
Well, I mean, if to me, it's if somebody's deconverted, that's just going to happen. It's like all you could really do is kind of push it in one direction or the other, and it may not go in a way that you want it to go. And it should never be the end goal anyways. I don't really want to end religion, because I don't really think you can. If you end one religion, another religion will pop up, because it's kind of a part of humanity.
Right.
So I don't really have that mindset that I want to end religion. I kind of want to just build good relationships with atheists and theists, and and agnostics, and just kind of just have a situation where if we agree on something, we work together. If we don't agree, hopefully we can just make sure it's pleasant.
Right. So you had a channel that was Polite Atheist for what, a couple of years, a year? Or?
It was about a couple of years. It did okay, but the atheist community and the skeptic community and all that, I just had to get away from it. So I decided to take a more a different approach. Yeah, I just so I pretty much have been just conversing with people who are, they're not toxic and full of drama, and they're just kind of, trying to learn philosophy, and just academic YouTubers, I guess, or more academic, I should say, than what I had been dealing with. Because at one point I started to realize I'm basically just doing white nationalist talking points all the time, and I'm like, yeah, I'm a liberal, so I don't know why I'm doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this takes us up to your channel. So you started the New Stoics roughly what, a few months back, you said?
Yeah, it actually was almost 4 months, and it's been going pretty well. I haven't had any big hits yet, but it doesn't really matter. It's kind of a form of meditation for me. And when I say meditations, it's like Stoic meditations, kind of like quiet reflections. I can kind of discuss what I know about Stoicism. I talk about how it could help people, and and if I grow, that's great. If I don't, it's not a big deal. I'm not really doing it to make money, and if I help one person with a video, that's a positive thing in my opinion. And the other thing is I kind of want to get a very wide crowd, because the one thing that's really nice about Stoicism is it could appeal to a lot of different people. So if you're an atheist, if you're a theist, if you're agnostic, there's a lot of things that could help you with Stoicism. You don't necessarily have to get into the meta ethics or the metaphysics to that. But you could apply just basic Stoic normative ethics to your life, and it will help you a lot.
Okay, so let's drill into that, because that'll take us right into Stoicism. How do you define it? And my understanding is of very basic, but Marcus Aurelius is an atheist, correct? He's one of the main voices in Stoicism. And then there's Epictetus, if I'm correct, who's not, who's a theist. But go ahead, tell us what Stoicism is and how it can help.
I would say both of those guys are theists, but they both kind of believe in. I believe Epictetus believes in the Greek pantheon, and both of them both believe in the Logos as kind of like a prime mover, kind of essential kind of God. But both, it actually is from before that. The Stoic school comes from the Cynic school, which, if you guys know anything about a man named Diogenes and a couple others, it's this idea that virtue ethics is about action. It's not about talking. It's about going out, doing good, and not even caring what society thinks about gaining virtue. And the Cynics and the Stoics both agree on the four virtues, which are justice, moderation, courage, and wisdom.
Okay.
And those are kind of the foundations of Stoic and Cynic virtue ethics. And
you said justice, moderation, courage, and wisdom. And wisdom. Okay, so those are the four. What are they called? The four pillars of Stoicism? Is this Stoicism?
I would call it that. Yeah, I just I say the four foundations or something.
The four virtues, kind of.
The four virtues. Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, people will just say it's the four virtues, or just the virtues. And the four of those are based in a foundation of rationality, that we can make we could make ethical decisions using our rationality.
Okay.
Yeah, because like in Marcus Aurelius, I just read one of kind of a I guess a basic kind of not course, but a condensed version of his book, The Meditations. And yeah, the word logos, I guess, has been translated in English with kind of a capital R, reason, which is very, very interesting, especially for any readers of C.S. Lewis, who kind of uses that as kind of like building off of, like, I guess, proof for the extra natural. Because if there wasn't any sort of I guess external quality to the universe than just material, there would be no capacity to see things from a reasoned perspective.
Yeah.
Anyway,
there's I don't know if I'm going to, but I'm eventually going to do a hangout with Andrew. I forget how to pronounce his last name, but
Stratalities.
Fatalities,
kind of like fatalities.
I'm kind of waiting until the whole
drama. Yeah, that's a good idea.
The drama with Dean Esme kind of dies. I'm sorry, not Dean Esme, Max Colby.
Yeah, we actually have Shannon in chat, and also actually Adam too.
Shannon, give her a wrench. Give her. Do you know how to give her a wrench, John? Are you not?
I don't
Shannon,
even have a wrench. Actually,
I don't know how to give wrenches, Shannon. I give you a
yeah.
wrench.
No, I
Who
can
else is-
change. I can change accounts. Yeah, Adam friended too. He's in there. Hi,
Yeah, give
Adam.
Adam a wrench. Adam, you get a wrench. Wrenches for everybody, for all my friends. All right. Yes, the red pill. Let's just briefly touch on that. You know, that's why I've said this to. I'm friends with some of the red pill guys, and I said, you know, I'd hang out with them more if it wasn't for the fact that every once in a while they'll just be outrageous. You know, like that was just totally uncalled for. And you know,
Yeah.
he got enough blowback for it, so I won't go into it. But it was completely unnecessary. You know, I don't mind the premise of them being bad cop Christians and like beating up on atheists, but they have to do it to the right atheist, the jerk atheist, not the cool atheist. You know, he just like I don't even know what triggered that whole thing. It looked like it was just out of thin air.
I don't really know. I was kind of in that whole discussion, and I mean I've heard of Max quite a bit. You know, like his past with the men's rights movement, and you know all the stuff that he's done before. And I would be having these really polite dialogues with people, and he would just come in there and say, "Well, if you're an atheist, that means you believe the same thing as the Nazis and communists." And I'm like,
right.
you know, is there some nuance to that? Are you gonna, you know, is there?
No, just take out like a sledgehammer and start pounding away, and not necessarily hit the right targets. Yeah, it was like with Shannon. He, as far as I could tell, that was out of thin air. She wasn't talking to him, doing anything to him. So, yeah, no, it's totally annoying. It's unnecessary. Getting back. So go ahead.
I've tried to make inroads with the red pill religion guys. I like Andrew quite a bit actually, and I speak with I don't know what he calls him. What's his first name? He goes by Supreme Apologist or something.
Apologies, Supreme. I don't know his first.
Apologies accepted. Apologies for all my behavior is what he's calling himself now. Andrew has actually been on this channel, and Andrew's cool, and for the most part, but he gets caught up in the drama. He gets caught up in the drama too, you know, because that's why I avoid it. You know, you gotta kind of distance yourself from people who are going to start trouble, because even if you're not starting the trouble, you know, like if John all of a sudden. You know, John's been on my channel almost every time I've streamed the last 2 months. If he goes on somebody else's channel and just starts yelling at them for no reason, that's going to look bad about, you know, people are going to be, why are you hanging out with that guy? I mean, you're like, well, you know, he's cool on my channel. He's a dick to us. You know, so.
Yeah, that's why I think the virtue of moderation is, I guess, it might be a worthy virtue to apply for both the anti-theist crowd and also the kind of toxic Christian crowd, where there needs to be this capacity for people to interact with each other that they disagree with, and to give
but that's also why Shannon is like the absolute worst person to target, because she makes a concerted effort. Honest to God, she does. I don't say that to pimp her out. She makes a really concerted effort to be nice and cool to everybody, even people she doesn't like. Go watch her thing with or doesn't agree with. Go watch her thing with what's that guy's name? Cy Brugenkate. Yeah. She was the nicest person to him of anybody that we know. So she's the wrong person to target as, like, you know, the bad guy atheist, because she isn't. So
well, there's you bring up a good point though. Is Max gets kind of his name gets pointed out, and I mean he deserves every bit of backlash that he gets, 100%. But the point I think the red pill guys are trying to make sometimes, especially Brass Wisdom, Andrew, and all those guys, is and there's this other guy, Philosophy Tiger, is
who's usually good, usually on point. Go ahead.
But they make is there's too many atheists making really bad arguments, and people need to kind of call it out. You know, there's atheists saying that if you're an atheist, you don't hold any beliefs. If you're an atheist, you're like a rock. You know, rocks are atheists. If you're an atheist, you're automatically smarter than a theist. And I was like, wow, how do you have these stupid thoughts in your head? And me and Steve McRae, we are constantly battling these people about just dumb ideas that are circulating. I'm just sick of it.
Watch. That's become Steve McRae has become my go-to. If I'm on Twitter and I can't really interact, I'll just read Steve's last. Like, if you had arguments outside of kindergarten, then you know that I'm talking about philosophical ideas. If I graduated from middle school, you recognize philosophy. You're pointing out to a dictionary. I'm not talking about the dictionary definition of atheism. It's so fun. It's so fun. And it's usually great because the people who he gets into it with are usually the dickhead atheists. Not always. Some of them are the cool atheists, but for the most part, one or two of them are the only people I've ever had trouble with. And
well, I'm like, the absolute worst on Twitter, and I don't know if either of you have interacted with her. It's Atheist Girl, and she is the most terrible person on Twitter. Like, she'll start saying that you abused her, you're stalking her. If you reply to her tweets, she'll send hundreds of people after you.
Yeah, I was friends with her about a year ago because she's friends with Renee, and I liked her. I found a good side to her, but then she thought she saw me get into a fight with somebody else and decided that I was not kosher or whatever. Same idea. She fights with people all the time, and she saw me get in a fight with someone. Was like, "See, I told you, you can't trust the Christian." Something like that.
Yeah. But it's just calling these ideas out, man. And you know, I eventually do want. I probably will have Andrew on pretty soon. I just a lot of people know a lot of Stoic principles because it's so ingrained into Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity that people don't even think about it. They don't know where it came from. Some of the ideas, especially just the idea that you just believing in Jesus is not enough. You need to do good, to be happy while you're in this world, and that's a very Stoic idea.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. Stoicism is. Go ahead. Sorry, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out it's pretty interesting how there's kind of been a modern revival for Stoicism. I think, at least popularized by Timothy Ferriss, who's kind of this self-help guru guy, and he's really kind of been a loud voice for Stoicism, and it's really interesting because it's kind of this psychological, practical philosophy that people can take on, either if you're atheist, secular, religious, anything like that, as a way to actually benefit how you live your life and actually be able to endure suffering much more nobly than otherwise.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest with you, a lot of people who leave their religions, they stop being Christians or they stop being, Muslims or something. Mm-hmm. You kind of feel a little empty, like you don't really know what your ethical code is, because once you get into the atheist community, you'll jump into people like TJ Kirk and all these people that are just flat out nihilists, and they're saying nothing matters, you're gonna die, you can't any kind of morality isn't real, and mm-hmm. it first of all, it's not true, and the second thing is, you can be a good person without having the belief in God, and having normative ethical theories based on virtue can help a lot of people. And if it's because a lot of people are lost right now, a lot of people.
Yes, absolutely.
We see it all day, don't we? I mean, when we go to the store, you see people yelling, you see people angry, just acting out in rage all the time. People who have minor things happen to them in their lives, and it causes an emotional breakdown. We need to have some self-control.
Well, that's one of the things about Stoicism that's probably has a lot to do with its surge in popularity, if in fact that's really happening, John, is that it totally addresses the central problem of today. If you just take a look at Twitter, if you just casually interact with the culture, the narcissism, the emotionalism, nobody knows anything, nobody learns anything, nobody's disciplined anymore, and people can't control themselves. And that's why they get caught up in these like psychodramas, and these moral panics, and they freak out. This thing on Twitter, because it's just the irrationality is creeping into the culture, and it's really destructive. And Stoicism is a way of combating that without religion. If you're turned off by the idea of going to church and praying to Jesus for self-control, you can go to Marcus Aurelius and read about the virtue of self-control. It's a good antidote. It's part of the reason why Peterson is popular too, by the way. Same thing. He's addressing the same gaping need in the culture. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Peterson's kind of going about it in a different way, using different models of truth, and he kind of follows like Nietzsche, and which I'm not actually the biggest fan of Nietzsche, but if it helps people live their life better, that's great. Because a lot of people do need it. I'm not a huge fan of Peterson, but I am a huge fan of how he's turning a lot of people's lives around, because a lot of people need a little bit of discipline in their lives.
Yeah. Right. I'm just saying that. Go ahead, John.
I was especially thinking, I recently read this book by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff called The Coddling of the American Mind. And it kind of paints this picture of a lot of the youth in America today are kind of going through really stressful times and not able to, not having a method for actually dispelling any of this high stress. And there's kind of this aspect of catastrophizing what is occurring to them, and making it like heightening. Okay, this is even more extreme than it actually seems to be, and it's seriously a need for either Stoicism, or the co-author Greg Lukianoff talks about how he used CBT training, which is cognitive behavioral training, in order to help him to get through his depression, because he was on the verge of suicide for a while before writing it. And so, yeah, I think there's a strong connection there, I think, between Stoic principles and probably CBT training put into practice, that I think is seriously going to be useful for a lot of people today. Yeah.
Right. I mean, catastrophizing is the perfect word. If I understand how he means that, like when I worked at Radio Shack, that's what these are the most blessed, fortunate people on earth. I mean, they live in Malibu. And like if they lost their cell phone for a weekend, they'd be like, I can't believe I have to go without a cell phone. Do you mean for 14 hours? Are you crazy? Like, what'd you do before you had a cell phone, guy? Get a hold of yourself. It's like there's so much like irrationality that religion solves in a lot of people's lives. It helps people control those things so that they can take things with more of a balanced approach and put things more in perspective. Stoicism would do that too.
It actually helps with actual catastrophes too, because I don't say this a lot, but I was in Panama City Beach when Hurricane Michael hit, and I was lucky enough that my home was not destroyed, but many of my friends and family, my parents actually lost a house. And it's funny when you look at people who lost so much, and they're just grasping at straws, and they don't know what to do. It's kind of like they feel like, and I'm sure thoughts of comfort, like, God works in mysterious ways or something helps people, and I'm sure it gives
Well,
some
something
people.
necessary is the point to deal
Yeah,
with that type of tragedy. There needs to be either philosophy or religion or something that keeps you going in
yeah,
those situations. Religion works. I mean, it honestly does. You know, if you have faith in situations like that, it can really help bring you through it. Stoicism would work too, taking control of your mind, things like that,
Mhm.
behavioral therapy. But you need something.
Yeah, I was
yeah,
thinking about the strong kind of connecting factor between Stoicism and probably religion, because I know in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's the Serenity Prayer that they really ingrain into a lot of the people there. That is talking about grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to
Right.
change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Like very much a strong Stoic kind of meditation to repeat to yourself. I think.
yes,
Yeah,
and
probably influenced by Stoicism.
well, and and to be honest, during the Greek times, Greek and Roman times, uh, pre-Christianity, Stoicism was pretty much practiced like a religion in a lot of ways. It has very detailed, it has a creation myth. It has, it used to have a lot of practitioners, had meeting places. You
Does it
know,
really?
yeah. I mean, it was not. It wasn't like a set religion, but there were Stoic meeting places. There was people.
It was kind of
Um,
like for each philosopher, they had their own kind of following behind them, right? Like followers of Plato
yeah,
or Socrates or Diogenes or
sure.
Epictetus, things like that. Kind of like
Well,
how in the early Christian church there is kind of this
were
followers of
they
Peter and Paul and
right?
Absolutely.
Were they partially divine? Or they weren't considered partially divine, were they?
No. I mean, the highest that you could really reach as a Stoic would be this idea of a Stoic sage.
He's like
And
badass. He's a
yeah,
bad, an official badass. He's a
it's
stoic.
there's
Like,
there's some people who say that you could obtain it, and there's others that don't. The way I look at
I,
it is, I don't really think it is. I think
you
it's
can.
it's it's kind of like if we look at it from a Plato mindset, it's the essential Stoic is the Stoic sage, and it's something that we should aspire to, but it isn't really a real thing because I feel like given everybody's personality, everybody's going to obtain a certain level of Stoicism, and it's not all going to be the same.
Right. So how do you see? Do you practice it
Yeah.
in a like a concrete way? And let's hear about that a little.
So I do meditations. I do it at night. Most Stoics do it during the day. I do it at night, so I plan for the next day. And basically I try and anticipate things that will happen to me. Um, things that I know will happen to me. Things um, on a global to a local level. Either I think it might rain tomorrow, all the way to I think my kids have this thing that I need to bring their lunches and all this kind of stuff. And it's all it is really detailed preparation. Situations that I
What
know might affect me.
for
Mhm.
potentialities?
Yes. So it's
Like
things that I know are going to happen. And things that possibly might happen, and things that I don't know is going to happen. Obviously, I can't really plan for, so I don't even think about
okay.
it.
Yeah. Are you aware of the another kind of self-help guru, Gary Vaynerchuk, something like that? I think that's how you pronounce his name. He does a lot of these types of like high stress businesses and helps with trading and different things like that. And he talks about like whenever he's undergoing some sort of stressful event, he has this mental picture in his mind of like, okay, what if like my entire family died? And like that would be the
Oh,
absolute
that's helpful.
that's the absolute like worst thing that could ever happen to him. And by meditating on that, anything else is basically nothing in comparison to that actually
I
happening.
don't, I don't know. I like happy pictures and rainbows and like.
Well, see, here's the thing: is most of the time, no matter what people say, is most people have that kind of positive outlook that they don't necessarily think about negative things that happen, and just try and be positive about whatever happens. And
Right.
the result is when something bad does happen, it affects you so much more than it does if you accept it as a possibility. And these things don't really work with some things, accidents and tragedies and all these kind of things. We can't really anticipate those things. But in what you guys were mentioning before about a family member being taken away, it's an idea from Epictetus in the Enchiridion, when he just mentions that if you love your wife and your son and they pass away, no matter how much grieving you do, will never bring them back. They will never come back in the way that they were. So you need to start the process of moving on, and it's a very tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
So part of a Stoic prescription, if I'm understanding this correctly, is you try to anticipate negative potentialities and you put coping mechanisms in place before they occur. Am I hearing that right?
So it's accepting things that will happen and that can happen, no matter how negative they are, and not think about things that you have no control over.
Okay, so break it down practically, so it's clear.
There's memento mori, right? That's another kind of like a connecting factor between Stoicism and particularly Catholicism, which is like remember your own death, like because that's something that you're never going to be able to avoid. That's something that you must always kind of prepare for in some sort of way, right?
Yeah, it's you need to remember that you are going to die, and it's something that's going to happen. And Epictetus likens it to a boat help, with a sailor. Is you always be close to the ship when the boat calls. And in my opinion, that has a lot to do with preparing for your own death and other people's deaths, and just accepting it as a possibility. And a lot of people can't do that. It's a very difficult thing. It affects me too. I don't want to think of my children dead. I don't want to think of my wife dead. I don't want to think of me dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with me dead, that's pretty easy because you just kind of assume you're gonna be taken out in a blaze of glory really quickly, without any pain. But like I can't imagine thinking it about your children in particular, because that's not necessarily going to happen.
Yes. So it's not just the really deep dark things. It's also with just little things that we just get upset with over nothing. It's kind of like if your kid came up and right in the middle of your phone call took your phone and just smashed it to pieces and started running around having a good time. The amount of rage so many people would feel at that point, a lot of people would say would be justified. And yes, it is a burden in some senses, because a lot of people do their work on their phone and they do a lot of things. But is it really necessary for you to act out in wrath towards your child in that instance?
Right.
And it's something that you just see every day. People do silly little things. Epictetus likened it to your kid breaking your favorite cup and you spanking the kid. He basically said, well, why would you beat him? You have plenty of cups. That favorite cup has the same likeness of other cups. So why is this broken cup so important?
So Epictetus was a slave, was he not?
Yes, at one point he was a slave, and
So was he stressed control your own benefit? Is that kind of what he was, or because with a kid, it depends on what you get angry about and what dosage. You know what I'm saying? Like,
well,
with
you have to understand how Stoics view anger. It's typically um, very, very little to zero justifications for acting out in anger. Most
okay,
Stoics
got it.
will take that position that it's not to say that Stoics don't believe in discipline. Stoics don't believe in, um, like teaching your children not to misbehave, but it's saying that you need to go about it in a different way because you're not trying to discipline your child in that instant. You're trying to
You're reacting. You're
yes,
trying to
exactly.
have emotional reactions that are out of your control.
Yes.
Like the anger when in our culture we tend to think of an emotion like anger as, oh, I was just so angry. And
Yes.
actually anger is a tool, and it's used against threat. In the case of a kid, it should be used sparingly to teach a lesson, and that's the only time it should be used. Like you
Yes.
should
And
be experiencing something a kid does as uncontrollable anger in yourself. That means there's something wrong emotionally with you. I
yes,
think folks would agree with me, right? Would they agree with me?
in a way, most Stoics would say that in some situations you take the appearance of anger so that people could see that what you're doing is wrong. For instance, Marcus Aurelius has said that judges, when sentencing somebody for a crime, should have the appearance of anger so that it's better understood that what they did was wrong, that breaking the
Right.
law was wrong. But most Stoics kind of take the opinion that if you're going to do something like you're trying to discipline your child or something, it should just be for the sake of it, not you trying to get revenge for them breaking an inanimate object that doesn't matter anymore.
Right. Right. So the anger in the case of a child, like, I mean, this is actually a really good, useful thing for people in general to experience anger in the correct proportion to the actual event, so that your anger isn't. Most people who have anger issues, they get angry about things that don't have any real, they're just angry, and then they get really angry. They're just going
Yeah.
crazy, and it has no bearing on the reality of the situation.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, instead of acting out in aggression towards the past, that which we cannot change, but instead acting in such a way that in the future that type of occurrence will not happen again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's totally useful. Okay, so what else happens on your Stoicism practice daily? How does it work?
So how it works is just action. It's if I can help somebody, I try my best to help them. If I see somebody who's changing their tire, I usually pull over and try and help them. It's this is the thing about Stoicism. It's not really about like saying a prayer or something. It's about action. It's kind of trying to control your anger when you get angry, because a lot of times it's emotional control, which is, if you ever driven a car, and Craig, you said you're in California, right?
Yes.
So a lot of times you could practice your stoicism pretty hardcore just driving your car around, right?
My middle name. I don't think I'll be practicing it too often. I'm from New York, though, so you got to understand. Someone cuts me off in traffic, forget about it. No, I'm driving here. But other than that, yeah, Stoicism would work. If no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So to me, the next thing about practicing Stoicism is reading about the Stoics, reading other philosophies, and just learning, and then you try and incorporate some of those teachings that have to do with Stoicism to your life. I actually appreciate existentialism quite a bit. A lot of ideas in existentialism, and I apply them in my life, and I try and apply them to Stoicism. I don't know if it works so well, but it makes a lot of sense to me because I feel like the two philosophies kind of complement each other in some ways.
They definitely can go hand in hand. Who are you talking about specifically?
Yeah.
Like Camus and Kierkegaard?
Yeah, well, it's mostly Sartre is one of my favorite existential philosophers. I like Kierkegaard too, but Jean Paul is one of my favorites because he gets into these ideas of authenticity and being a good faith actor in certain situations. So the way I apply that with my life and to my Stoicism is I am not doing this because I am trying to forcibly apply an ideology to myself. I am doing this because this is who I am. This is a part of who I identify as a Stoic, and so I really I apply especially authenticity to how I do my channel. And I know it sounds really weird, but I don't really edit my audio so much, so it does sound a little choppy and unedited. But I try and do one takes because I want it to be one authentic sounding message, and I really I don't know if it'll stay that way, but my hope is I want people to not just know that I'm a guy calling myself a Stoic. I am a Stoic, and I'm not claiming to be a sage, and I'm not claiming to be this great guy, but I am somebody who is being genuine about it. It's something I really believe in.
It's something you're really trying to live out and embody. Yeah, that's
Yes.
pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I do all my videos in one take too, but that's because I have no idea how to edit the videos. So, okay, now in relation to other philosophies and things like that, some of those things that the Apostle Paul said could probably fit comfortably into a Stoicism framework.
Yes.
I place my body under subjection, things like that. There's a strain of Christianity that could be more Stoic, potentially. I think it's not generally considered part of what Christianity is, but it's definitely in there. It's in the Bible. Just definitely, he who conquers himself is greater than he who conquers a city. That would probably be something that if Marcus Aurelius said it, it would fit comfortably, right?
Yeah, Christianity and Stoicism go together really well as long as you allow for the idea of virtue ethics, which some branches of Christianity don't altogether. Like if we're looking at Calvinism, and if we're looking at what's the somebody just told me the other day they believe that if you just believe in Jesus, you're good no matter what else happens afterwards.
Oh yeah, there's
right.
kind
Solo
of evangelical faith. Or what is it? The prosperity gospel. There is kind of a lot of that. Yeah,
it's the most disturbing thing. It almost feels like Ayn Rand philosophy applied to Christianity. It's like, holy cow! It's like what's the point of even mentioning any of the good works that Jesus and anybody else did in the Bible?
Yeah, prosperity gospel is basically like capitalism Christianity. Like if you wanted to merge those two kind of philosophies into something.
Yeah, that's what it definitely grew out of, like churches needing money. Really, this is found a good way to we need money because send money to Jesus, and then that could be your faith seed, and if you send a harvest of Are you talking about that particular strand of it where you send like,
Yeah.
if you send $50, Jesus gonna bless your $50 and your $50 is gonna turn $1,000. That.
Yeah. We got a good question from the chat from Dan. It looks like you were working on it. But I think like especially describing virtue ethics. Okay, so his question is describe virtue ethics. And I think especially in comparison to say kind of like utilitarian ethics or consequentialist ethics. Yeah. Where it's okay, yeah,
good
you go
for your own sake. Go ahead.
Yeah. So virtue ethics is a lot more works and action kind of set of ethical theories. It's a normative ethical system. So we don't really kind of get into the ontology of the system. I typically believe that they're objective, but some people may say that they don't think the four virtues are. But at that point, it doesn't really matter because it has to do with how you apply the virtues to your life. And so when you see something happen, you judge it based upon your views on justice, moderation, and sometimes it could be one or more. And it's just how those views shape how you act afterward, because that's where virtue ethics kind of come from. It's ideas of Socrates and later applied by the Cynics that just being a good person doesn't really mean anything. You have to practice and you need to get better. LeBron James did not, just grow up with a basketball in his hand. He had to practice. He had good genes for it, but at the same time, I've seen a lot of 6'7" guys who can't, they can't even tie their laces. So
right.
It's being prepared to do the right thing and applying those ideas to your everyday life.
Yeah. I'm reminded, like, as you brought up with Socrates, like the story of the death of Socrates, I think is a good example of like how somebody might live a virtuous life even into death, rather than living, say, maybe like a utilitarian life for a person's own, say, I don't know, of well-being, because that's kind of such a vague statement, but it like if they were living according to their own survival or self-interest, something like that. Whereas Socrates, when given the option to kind of flee Athens, instead decided to do what was right according to his own conscience.
Right.
Yeah. So in his opinion, he was going to die in a virtuous way, and the state was going to live with that injustice that they just committed. Everybody who sentenced him to death has to live with that injustice. And so a lot of people will liken Stoicism from Aristotle or Plato, but it's I would say it's Socrates that most of the ideas of virtue ethics comes from, and then later from the Cynics, and then to the Stoics that we have today, or then.
Yeah.
Are there other questions, John, from the chat?
Let's see. HistoryNet did want to mention, I guess, him, Brass Wisdom, and quite a few of the other guys from the Red Pill religion have effectively resigned. So that was the topic a while back, but yeah, it's good to.
And I'm okay with Max, kind of official. If he can get a sincere apology from Shannon and she accepts it, and he starts bettering himself from that point on, I am more than happy to start playing nice with Max again. But I feel like he really, he just
and then his apology was completely half-assed too. So
it really was.
So
yeah, but I here's the thing. I'm not really expecting everybody to be a Stoic. In fact, the whole idea with Stoicism is assuming people don't want to do it. It's more than being like a utilitarian when you think about these really complex kind of mind problems, like Peter Singer and talking about, if you just give $20 a day to this charity, then blah, blah, blah. It's actually just getting out there and doing the right thing. And, it's not an easy thing, especially this day and age when most people are just kind of yelling at each other on the internet for some reason. But it's something that could really help.
What's the exact opposite of stoicism is what's going on in our culture right now. Encouraging victimization, encouraging really just to be like a flaming baby about everything in like safe spaces and things like that. That's all an outgrowth of breakdown in discipline, really, because if you're not controlling yourself, then it's like if you've ever met prisoners, they have no idea how to actually govern themselves at all. So everything triggers them, everything. And that's the exact opposite of stoicism. Like they can't handle anything because they can't govern their own body. They can't govern their own emotions. They can't govern their own mind. And I think that's a big part, at least as far as my limited understanding of stoicism is, that's a big part of it, is governing your own emotional reactions to things. I don't know if that's just my own projection onto stoicism or if that's actually stoicism.
The best analogy I could think of is it's kind of like the rider on the horse. The horse is your emotional responses to things, and you just having control of the beast. There's a lot of good that you can do if you're in control of your facilities, but not if you let the beast loose.
Right.
Yeah, I think lately in kind of politics and also in just in general, like kind of the modern typical philosophy for just general interactions, there's kind of this idea of like victim of circumstances and kind of like determinism, where the reason I'm bad is because of my upbringing and anything like that. And something I like about Stoicism, as far as I understand it, is kind of like even if that were true, there's kind of, well, actually, there's probably more pragmatism, but I think there might be some sort of connection to it. But you're only in charge of your own, like how you react to certain things, and like that's what's under your control, and everything else is kind of essentially outside of your own control. So it's almost like this mentality of like everyone else is almost deterministically ran because I have no control over that, whereas I myself have control. So like there's no blaming others because they had no. That's kind of like what I was trying to get at with part of my video. It is everyone besides yourself. It is a like, and it's more in regards of like how we keep a mentality of them. Anyway, they are not a victim of circumstances, but a byproduct of all of their history. And like, we need to keep that in mind whenever we're interacting with them. Whereas for ourselves, like we shouldn't
we're
be
in charge. We're the captain.
Yeah, we shouldn't be blaming just our own history for how we reacted badly, because a lot of times we can act badly and then blame our own history in a way to kind of like get out of our own responsibility for our actions. I see a lot.
Right, and part of it is also just becoming an adult. There's a certain part where you start growing up and taking responsibility for your actions and your responses to things, and you recognize to some degree, yeah, it's an unfair world, but that's what I'm going to have to deal with. I don't know where that is stoicism, and where stoicism actually comes in with concrete way of processing that. Do you work with people in your channel? Do people like comment, and some people who you try to hear, this could help you in stoicism, if you could learn this thing? Does that happen?
Yeah, I have a lot of frequent commenters. John's one of them. Snarky.
John, this John
Snarky.
Right here.
Yeah.
John, our John.
Yeah. Yeah,
What's he
Um,
trying to say?
great.
He's saying snarky things. Oh,
so
Mrs.
so no,
Snarky.
her name's Miss Snarkus.
Oh yeah, Miss
Um,
Snarky. Yeah,
uh, Godless Iowan. He comments quite a bit, and
Diogenes the dog too.
yeah,
He's a real
and
actor.
Diogenes is he's got to be my biggest fan by far.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, I'm grateful that I'm in that position that I have somebody who enjoys my videos as much as he does, and he tells me it helps him. He tells me it helps with his virtue ethics, and he's a self. He considers himself a cynic in the old sense. So Stoics and cynics get along famously, typically. So I've gotten messages that say that it helped them with their with a loss of life in their life.
Oh, wow.
It's actually it's
That's
helped
big.
me deal with deaths in my life. It's helped me deal with tragedies in my life. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's going to be like one of those things that's a cure all. It's something that people will just practice, and over time they'll realize how much it's improved their lives.
Right.
And
It's a set of tools for which to
yes,
approach reality.
yes, that's a great way to put it.
Godless Iowan started doing, he seems to have stopped, but for a while back, he was starting to actually talk about Stoicism on his channel. I guess that was your influence. He was doing a philosophy corner for a bit, only lasted a couple of weeks.
Yeah, he was getting back into Stoicism. He was doing philosophy stuff, and he went back. To be honest with you, I don't really blame him. It's a really hard section of YouTube to be successful at. People, it's hard to be topical and discuss ideas of philosophy. I'm trying to make that attempt. I don't know how well it will go, but he's more of a successful YouTuber than I am. He's got over 5,000 subscribers, and he's trying to be a full time YouTuber. But he may appear as kind of a snarky atheist guy, but I know in private he's a very devoted Stoic, and he does the meditations, and he reads all the Stoic works of literature, and so does his wife, Miss Snarkus, and she's a great person, and she's got a really good channel, and she goes over works of philosophy too. She's also a frequent commenter, and I really, it's because of them that I have as many subscribers as I've had, because they raised quite a bit of subs during the holiday. But they're a really good. They're a couple really good friends of the channel, I would say.
That's awesome.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah. So it's kind of like I'm. I have a lot of people who watch me. They don't, it's not a huge crowd, but it's they're kind of bigger names, I guess you could say. But it
Been coming. You're more influential than you are. Like
popular.
the people who watch you make it matter. They make a difference.
Yes.
That's kind of similar to me. I don't have that many subscribers, but the people who watch me have thousands, hundreds of thousands. They're setting the world on fire, and I'm steering the ship in my mind. Go ahead, John. What were you going to say? Were you going to say something?
I mean, that's the main thing is, and I don't really, it's great if I have a bunch of subscribers. I'm going to do what I can to get my videos better. I'd like to improve my, my voice acting a little bit, so it's a little bit more fluid, and I speak in less jumpy kind of ways. But if I really don't get any subs or anything, it's okay. I enjoy doing this. It's kind of a part of my meditations, to be honest with you.
I'm sure you'll grow. You'll grow fine. You're not going to grow like some of the more popular atheists because they grow off the charts. But I'm sure you'll grow fine where you have like 1,000 or 2,000 by April, or maybe a couple months later or something like that. I would expect. I mean,
No, I'm doing okay. I don't mean to imply that I'm not doing okay, but I actually have a manager, and he's kind of helping me get a few more clicks here and there, and he's been doing a really good job. He's gotten he gives me a little bit of advice how to use my tags a little bit better, and I mean it's just kind of a little partnership I have on the side. He doesn't really know anything about Stoicism. So it's
interesting.
like,
So he's trying to work out business end of
yeah,
eventual YouTube growth, things like that. That's cool.
exactly. Yeah. So I'm not even thinking about the growth at this point. He's kind of looking into it because he saw my channel and he thought it might be something that could be successful over time. And in my in my opinion, is I don't want this to just be a YouTube channel. I eventually want it to be an organization. And
a Stoicism thing, a Stoicism cult. No, a Stoicism.
So I would say more of a group where people can learn about Stoicism. People can have anger management classes. People could learn about virtue ethics. And one of my big things would be to have politicians start applying virtue ethics to their lives so that they're a little bit more accountable.
That would be killer. That would revolutionize the world. Are you kidding? Politicians doing the right thing just because it's the right thing to do.
Exactly.
Forget it. The country would come to a standstill. Or be like, I don't know what to do. Everything works properly. I don't know what to do anymore. Are there Stoicism getting to like organizations, things like that, that you interact with or know about, or like if someone's watching this and they're kind of interested, because I know a lot of the atheist activists have a whole bunch of stuff that they can rattle off, like go check this out and that out.
Sure.
I hate religion organization and the cooking babies for kids or something like that.
So typically, the number one source I would say is if somebody wants to get into Stoicism, it's a professor. His name is Gregory Sadler, and he's a really great professor. Yeah, and he's a great source on the Stoics, especially Seneca and Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius, and he has hundreds of these courses. And so he'll go to the he has beginner classes, he has advanced classes that he teaches.
Philosophy guy? Is he that YouTube philosophy guy? I think I've watched him.
He's got a goatee and he's got a long beard, but he's extremely influential in the modern Stoicism movement. He helps. He a lot of times teaches at Stoic Week, which is a big event that a bunch of Stoics get together and start discussing how to apply Stoicism to their lives. There's another big name, Massimo. I'm going to butcher his name, but I think it's Poliucci. Massimo Poliucci from Italy, and he's easily one of the most influential Stoics today. And he's more of a modern Stoic, so he's an atheist, so he doesn't really follow the logos to the law like in the old days, but he has a great YouTube channel. He does chats. He discusses the difference between Stoicism and like Buddhism, the influence of Stoicism on Christianity and Judaism.
Oh, that's cool.
He's a very well-learned person, and he actually recently did a debate with Lawrence Krauss and Daniel Dennett, and it was really good until Lawrence Krauss started talking. Man, that guy, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect my theoretical physicists to really know much in philosophy. So whenever they try to overstep their bounds, it's always a little bit cringy. I'll have to check that out. That sounds great.
It's worth watching though, because it's actually
what's that guy's? How do you spell his last name?
Pigliacci or
Massimo, Massimo. His last name. I'm gonna
yeah,
just.
it's Pigliucci.
Pigliucci. Bellucci.
Pigli-
Hey, Bellucci.
So I'm
De dove sai?
I'm probably going to have a conversation with Dr. Sadler at some point.
Oh, awesome.
I want to talk to Massimo at some point, but I got to kind of grow my name a little bit. But both of them are extremely knowledgeable, great starting places when you're trying to apply your or just learn about it. To be honest with you, if you're just coming for just curiosity's sake, they're excellent sources. And the main thing about Stoicism is it's not dogmatic at all. You could take bits and pieces. There's not going to be an official Stoic group that's going to ask for you to be killed because you're using Stoicism in vain or anything. It's
Right.
it's if something works and something doesn't work, that's fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, that sounds a little weak to me, but I'm sure John that appeals to John, I'm sure, because he's like, yeah, let's just all have, happy stoicism. I'm sort of like the punish the heretic type school of Christianity myself. I understand the appeal. Okay, so why?
Don't get me wrong. There are Stoics out there like that, but there's so few of them that they're just kind of like yelling
Right,
into the computer.
Pots as opposed to the main group. It's weird. Even like Taoism, you would think is like the most peaceful, or Buddhism, and then you find out when you start digging into like how people actually practice this stuff, you find there's a whole bunch of people who like there's a whole cosmology to Taoism that's just as nuts as anything you've ever heard
Sure.
on any side of it. Okay, so why when people like Godless Iwan and Miss Snarky, they're becoming more interested in it as a practical thing in their life, would you say? Is that something that's kind of happening? Like it's helping people get their S together, so to speak?
Well, I would say the biggest group of people who are going into Stoicism are atheists by far. It's a huge chunk of them, and it's mainly because there's just it's like what I mentioned before. There's a big hole that's left from religion, and there's a set of emptiness with right and wrong. And once people start looking into what is right and wrong, you kind of have to think about it a little bit. You can't just say, "Oh, I just know it's right. I just know it's wrong." It's like, well, that doesn't work.
Yeah, a lot of times it's just our emotions getting the best of us in those moments.
Exactly, and so they were in a similar situation. I kind of came into Stoicism just my love of philosophy. To be honest with you, I like a lot of different ideas in philosophy, but Stoicism is it's probably the most self-help kind of form of philosophy out there, and the principles are based on reality. So that's why I fell into that.
That's why I would think it would be pretty popular. It would actually be a natural fit for a lot of atheists because they tend to be philosophical. When they're not being evil, they tend to be philosophical, and they tend to be sharper and more thoughtful. That's why I thought I was going to get along with atheists, to tell you the truth. Long before I thought of getting a YouTube channel, doing this online, I was like, I'll probably get along with atheists pretty well because I watch a lot of atheist YouTubers, and that was one of the most noticeable traits. So, plus there is something. This is what I talk about a lot on my YouTube channel, which for lack of a better word, we call the void. Peterson brought it up in his debate with Sam Harris, is that when you strip away the religion, there needs to be some form of replacement, either philosophically or something, to give somebody, meaning in their life, a forward momentum, or however you want to describe it. And Stoicism would be a natural fit because it need not be I didn't realize that Marcus Aurelius was a theist, but it doesn't have to be, because Sam, as an example of, how to have virtue without God.
Well, I think you definitely need a foundational belief structure to really have a rigid ethical code. And there's a lot of secular theories that kind of try and replace that, either natural humanism and utilitarianism. Even though I really hate utilitarianism. It's got to be the worst one. But but I would say, even if an atheist just says they're a hedonist, I'll take a hedonist over a nihilist or something, because those people, they scare the shit out of me. And
if they
the
actually
crap out of me.
do it for real, they would scare everybody. But most people just, when they say they're a nihilist, usually it's just some sort of pose.
Yeah.
I was a nihilist when I was 20 because I was in a punk rock band. It's like, what philosophy? I'm a nihilist, man. Yeah. It was fake. It wasn't, you just. John, any good questions in the chat or anything you want to ask? No.
Are you aware of no, not really from the chat? Let's see that I saw. Are you aware of Jocko Willink?
I think I've heard the name.
Okay, yeah, he's another Stoic-ish type philosopher with kind of like with Timothy Ferris and things like that. He's got this book called Discipline Equals Freedom and Extreme Ownership, different things like that. And he was a Marine commander, and so he took a lot of like the core principles from leading an effective Marine team and kind of brought that into, I guess, like business and also like how to live a more virtuous life. Anyway, I was reminded of this kind of like, I guess, saying of his where like whenever something bad happens to you or something unexpected occurs to you, what you can do is whenever that happens to respond to it with a single word of good. And then you create some sort of justification for why this event happening to you is actually something good. So like you lose your job. Oh, that's good because you can find a job that's more suited to your talents because you're going nowhere in this job anyway. Or you've gotten a promotion in your job. Good. Now you can put more effort into it and have
right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Have a better mentality towards what you're doing. And so it seems to me like it's something I'm always trying to remind myself whenever something unexpected happens to me, is to try to keep that mentality of like good, and then trying to come up with a reasoning for why.
There's an actual science that I tried to talk about this a little in my videos, but I didn't really know how to address it. But I'm sure there's an actual science of emotional resilience, and the Stoicism, when it's certain aspects of Stoicism probably fit it perfectly. And there's probably even certain aspects of Christianity that do, wherein you have where they study what makes somebody emotionally resilient, and you have a fallback position. Like even in Christianity, like if you think, God, closed this door and opened another door, atheists not that, but that's a really useful paradigm, to like resilient. And I'm sure it matches certain things in Stoicism that actually train you in emotional resilience. To be better. Like one of the things I noticed with my father, speaking of death and things like that, is he was really bad at handling his emotions in general in life, terrible at it. And he didn't practice the skill. So when it came to something real like cancer, he fell apart. He couldn't handle it at all. And the first thing I noticed when I went back to New York to interact with him is he couldn't handle it. He probably could have handled the illness if he could have handled the emotions. And he could not handle the emotions because he had no practice. And Stoicism, I think, on some level, teaches you to handle better, a coping mechanism, coping tools for reality. Right? Is that?
I think back to the way that the great philosopher Seneca the Younger passed away. Is basically he was implicated in a conspiracy against the Emperor Nero, and basically a messenger came over and said, "Hey, we think you have a hand in this, and the Emperor Nero has sentenced you to death." And Seneca just quietly talks to his wife and says, "Oh well, I guess it's my time to go." And he died very, very slowly and painfully, but he didn't cry, and he just kind of took it as a way that he was lucky enough to know when he was going to go.
See, that's exactly how I'd be, John, not some little wuss. I'd be like, bring it, mofo. Come on. Yeah, I'll die slow. And I'll look them in the eye the whole time I was dying, John. Be like, yeah. They'd be like, wow, that guy's hardcore, man. He must be a stoic.
Yeah. And me, I'll just be over there crying like, no, please!
No! Help me! Jesus, help me! I'm sorry for yesterday.
Exactly.
So are we schooled? What did we leave out? You're the Stoic expert in the house today. What did I not ask that I should have asked? What else you want to point us out to?
I think we covered most of the bases. To be honest with you, it's this is just the beginning. If anybody's watching this and they are curious about Stoicism, your journey begins. It's something that you have to just study about, learn about, and start applying to your life. You can take several different approaches, but if you do it right and you live a virtuous life, you could be happy.
Awesome. And if you're watching, make sure you subscribe to his channel because it'll revolutionize your approach to reality. Right now, you're probably a little scared, little girly man. No offense, but he can turn into a stoic, a hardcore captain of industry.
Yeah,
John,
definitely. Like if you're like to give a good reasoning for why to look into Stoicism, not just because it's another philosophy among many, but because of its practical utility for you. Like you're facing situations that you don't know how to deal with or that you can't deal with, like very stressful environment that you're within, or you hate your job or your family or something like that. It gives you the practical tools for how to deal with that without living in misery.
Exactly. I'm sure there's actual scientifically verifiable attitudes buried in Stoicism that really help people like to literally overcome in difficult circumstances. I'm sure of it. There's a science to this that just, I don't know where to look for it exactly.
Yeah. Well, I do know, like, in the recent APA, which I guess is like a study in psychology, it's kind of listed masculine traits of Stoicism as actually being toxic. Because
that's because today's world. Look at them. When they have a safe space, those are the same people who have to quit college because Ben Shapiro showed up.
Well, to me, I kind of feel like it's probably good to really highlight the colloquial understanding of Stoicism and what Stoicism actually is. A lot of people will consider a Stoic to be just a mindless, like Vulcan. You'll do whatever somebody forces upon you. You'll be obedient and quiet, and you're not going to cry out when something bad happens to you. You're going to be expected to take on the responsibilities. No, Stoicism is about reacting to reality.
Right.
And in a lot of situations, when men feel obligated to take on certain responsibilities that they have no business taking on, that is not being a Stoic. That is being the opposite of a Stoic.
It's pressure. It's about your inner virtue. It's about responding to expectations.
Yes.
It's not Stoicism seems to me more about your internal, and that's what its relationship to existential. It's more about your authentic internal human, who you actually are, right?
Yes.
That's where your relationship to the world flows out of what you actually are on a daily basis. That was big with Sartre.
Yeah. So that's usually my response to that is most of the time when people say stoic, they're not talking about the Stoics. They're talking about this stereotype of a Stoic that that men are just these have to be these mindless robots and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of this is kind of into ideology that doesn't really fit reality, because a woman could be a Stoic. Women have been great Stoic, and being a Stoic is not a toxic thing. It's really weird that the feminists just went after that. It's just kind of like, what? Why? Doing the right thing and being active and trying to, be virtuous. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's part of the, I guess, attack against masculinity in some forms, because men have so much more aggression within them. Anything that, any masculine traits seems, and if under the understanding that aggression is always going to be bad, even though there are certain instances where aggression is kind of necessary, especially when going against those that are being unjust. But yeah, it's
a knee-jerk it's a knee-jerk. It's part of what goes on nowadays. It's why certain segments of our culture become so toxic, because there's knee-jerk responses to things. All they have to hear is certain buzzwords like male, and
exactly.
And they start thinking immediately of the most negative possible stereotype in their mind of what it means, and that's what they respond against. They're not really responding against the reality of it's a philosophy of governing yourself and having appropriate emotions to the world around you, things that they would probably applaud if they were thinking clearly, but they're not.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great.
Yeah, this was a killer. This was a great show. Like I said, go subscribe to his channel and revolutionize your life. You've been a girly too long. No offense to any actor. It's time. Do you want to be like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse? He's like, pain don't hurt. That's how Stoicism teaches us to be. That's how we are now. Pain don't hurt.
Well, I don't know about that. But
John, you want to say anything? No comments in the section, or you want to say?
No, I just wanted to thank Tim for both for allowing me to put a video on his channel, and as well for talking with us and giving us all the facts about Stoicism and giving us the special Stoic advice that we all needed. So
yeah, awesome. And John, if you want to, or Tim, if you want to send John a thing that sort of applies to my channel, I'd be happy to post it. So you can do that too.
Yeah, if you want to,
relating it to Christianity or something, or whatever I talk about.
Sure. Well, I am looking for a few people kind of outside of Stoicism that have quite a bit of experience in certain topics and different philosophies. And right now I'm working with a guy named Gray Skeptic. He's actually doing a video on an idea called virtuous nihilism, and so that should be interesting. But so I got a lot of really interesting things happening on the channel, and if you have a thought of something you want to go over, just DM me and we'll get it set up.
Yeah, cool. We should actually talk about one of the things that you've brought up a couple times now on your channel that I think is really a good idea that you should put more into, the gob fat, the What does the acronym stand for again?
Good or bad faith argument technique.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
So it's just applying the idea of the null hypothesis to the Socratic method. So basically, before you even enter into an argument with somebody, you have the person on the other side has to accept that there is something that nullifies their position. And if they can't accept if they can't accept something nullifies their position, then you can't go further in a good faith argument.
Right. In other words, there's a reason to be talking to you, or there isn't. I'm talking to a brick wall, or I am not. Are you a brick wall? The only problem is they'll tell you. They will be honest.
It's a good way of weeding out bad conversations. That's all I could say.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, that's something we need, though. But yeah, I was thinking, like, at some point, like, it would be interesting to see you or like you and some other people or something setting up some sort of good or bad faith over good or bad faith argument technique and like put into practice to see what that actually like looks like in an actual well formulated debate. I think
like a rehearsed version of what a good faith argument.
Yeah. It would be good.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
You'd almost have to have like if it was just really spontaneous, you'd almost have to have like six or eight like debaters set up because half of the people won't acknowledge that there is a nullification to their position.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, how can I be wrong?
It's like, what do you mean I'm wrong? I'm already right. You got to prove to me how I'm wrong. I don't know. I can't be coming up with all the reasons for why I'm wrong. You got to be doing that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's a little project. I am kind of working out. I want to maybe just do like maybe a mock debate and just try and play it out. I want to see it works really good with me on Twitter, but the sad part is I never get past the first part because very few people want to nullify their position. But no, it's an interesting idea. I've been kind of playing around with the idea because I really like the Socratic dialogue, but I feel like the problem with the Socratic dialogue is a lot of times you could get into these situations in really, really bad faith. One of the best examples of this is street epistemology, because a lot of times they're just going to deconvert Christians, and that's a really bad faith approach to starting honest, open dialogue with people.
Yeah, it's really rough too when like you're like in a like the person you're interacting with is trying to get you to come out of your own position, but they themselves don't have any positions of their own. They're just adopting whatever is necessary in order to get you outside of your own.
It's just taken one part. It's just taken one part of the Socratic dialogue. Just the beginning part where, you would have a dialogue with an interlocutor, but it doesn't go back onto you. So you have all the power in the situation, and it kind of unnerves people a little bit.
Yeah. Well, this is actually something I
play. Go ahead.
Yeah, this was something I kind of mentioned kind of offhand on Twitter, how it's almost like doing more harm, I think, than good in how a lot of the like anti-theist YouTubers are going up against flat earthers, because flat earthers are like the super fundamentalist Christians. And then the only people that are actually arguing against them are people that are completely outside their like scope of people that they're willing to actually listen to and hear from. Because like if an atheist tells you like, oh, the earth is actually round, also God's not real, things like that, it's like, okay, well, I know you're already wrong on this one thing, that being the existence of God. I'm not going to listen to you on this other thing because you're obviously an idiot. So like I think more debates where kind of like the inspiring philosophy in Kent Hovind, but even that might have been too far outside of their own worldviews to get a good dialogue, but at least something closer to that, where people from the same sort of philosophical background can.
Kent Hovind and what's his face, Joel Anderson. Did you watch any of that?
I haven't seen that yet, but I'm looking forward to it. Yeah,
Well,
I've seen some of his stuff on Twitter interacting with the Jesus mythicists, which is great. But like, the Jesus, like Tim O'Neill and biblical history skeptics, they go after a lot of the atheists that are making the bad arguments about like Jesus wasn't even a historical figure, and I think stuff like that is definitely necessary.
Well, that's just going too much. I think it's kind of like to a lot of atheists, it's like having a cherry on top of the cake if he if he didn't exist.
Yeah,
at all.
It makes everything so much easier.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, he didn't even exist. It's kind of like when you hear some of the insane theories, like how Muhammad was created by a group of Jews to control Christians or something. You know, it's just like, come on, people. These are obvious conspiracy theories.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you just use your head a little bit. It's like
right,
that.
But you got to the nub of it is with the bad faith, because even with the Steve trying to clarify on the atheist thing, a lot of the reason why he gets so much blowback is that there's a definite dog in the fight in terms of the colloquial definition of atheism being a lot easier to defend in a debate. You don't have to defend your own position. You can just go after mine. I mean, that's a lot of it. That's a lot of why people are intuitively rejecting that, because it makes the debate harder on their side.
Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the lack of belief atheists, they hold to the burden of proof thing, where like whoever's asserting a positive position has the burden of proof, and so if they don't put forward any positive assertion because they just lack a belief in a deity, then they don't have that burden of proof that they have to go through.
They can just keep coming after you. It's the same thing with the mythicists. Is like the psychological motivation is now it's 100 times easier to defend against Christianity if I can start the conversation from, well, Jesus doesn't even exist. We're not even to whether he's God or not. We're going to spend the whole time, it's 100 times easier. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I think the biggest problem, especially with lack of belief atheists, I kind of coined the term. You may have seen it on Twitter, but I call them rock atheists.
Yeah.
But the problem that I'm having is, one, they are making positive assertions all the time outside of just saying they're a lack of belief. They said, they'll say, Christianity's wrong. They say it's bad. They say, if God exists, he would be a tyrant. Those are all positive claims. You got to back those up. You can't make these kind of claims and not have any kind of justifications. So if you truly were a lack of belief atheist, you should say nothing about God all the time. You should just shut up whenever someone talks about God, because you don't have a dog in the fight.
That's kind of like where Friended is at. He actually is a lack of belief atheist. He just doesn't believe that God is real, but he doesn't engage in the conversations when they come up, because that's it. He just doesn't believe it. That's what would really happen if it were just a lack of belief. I don't believe in Santa Claus. Okay, so if somebody starts debating with me about Santa Claus, you're just like, all right, that's fine. When is this debate over? When is this debate over? Because I really just honestly just don't believe. So, we can stop this right now. I really don't believe it.
No, I mean, but to me, it's kind of like, my justification's usually pretty simple, and it's usually personal. And I think a lot of atheists have been bought into this really weird idea that you have to have this like world-ending evidence that God definitely doesn't exist. Otherwise, you can't actually claim yourself to be an atheist. Like, being an atheist is like being a Stoic sage. You have to have all the knowledge in the world to claim you're an atheist. It's like, no. People believe in God on personal accounts. That may not be something that you could prove to everybody, but it's still evidence that they believe God exists, and that's all that's needed in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's some sort of like rational justification, and there's plenty of rational justifications for why you can be an atheist, and there's definitely rational justifications that you can have for being a theist as well. So like, there's not really a need to just take this kind of milquetoast position of lack of belief. You can hold an actual position, and And actually, it's not like you require, it's not like I require enough justification for my position in order to convince every person that I interact with to also take on my position. That would be an incredibly wasteful amount of time, because a lot of people will have a different level of requirement for what they take to hold on to take on a position.
To be fair to the lack of belief atheists, part of the other thing is that they enter into conversations with Christians who operate in bad faith. And if they hold to a stronger atheist position, the Christian will just use that as a cudgel to be like, well, prove that God doesn't exist, prove that God doesn't, to just it's just as counterproductive, to spend time debating with somebody. I kind of believe that the more honest position is agnostic, but I'm not going to debate somebody into that. That's just like.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, it kind of takes away people's personal experiences on why they believe in God or why they don't believe in God. And so a lot of, most of my justifications are personal reasons and just like my viewing reality. And, that's not always going to work on a scientific level. I'm not going to be able to have a peer reviewed paper on why I think there's no God because because bad things happen or something, that's not going to be enough to really win over, but it's still a justification. And so you can't pretend that you need this mega ultra justification that all the theists are just going to look at, and they're just going to renounce their faith and then just start praying to the great God atheismo for the rest of their lives. Right. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was thinking, you something needs to be done with your idea of the gob fat, because these types of conversations aren't happening properly.
Yes. I like I mean, definitely something needs to be done so that the conversations are more honest and worth listening to and engaging in. And so I agree with that. The gob fat, I think the gob fat thing is a good idea.
Well, I'm working on it. But I'll let you guys know if I'm planning on a mock debate or something. But it's my baby. I'm working on it.
Definitely, yeah. I'd be super willing to help out in however I can.
All right, appreciate it, John. Well, I better get to my kids. They're probably getting ready.
Yeah, man. This was a killer conversation. This was a great show. I told you, digital Hammurabi who. Nobody cares anymore. Nobody cares anymore. They've been replaced.
Oh, don't. They're awesome. Don't, yeah.
No, they're fun. No, I'm just talking smack. So, John, what else? What do you want to say before we close her out? Any final comments? What's running through your mind?
Pick up the what is it? The abridged Marcus Aurelius, or the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. That's a great book to go over, and it's
Enchiridion.
Huh?
The Enchiridion the best, I would say, for a starter.
Yeah, especially it's kind of like one of those books that you can just kind of flip through anywhere and just read it like a passage to help you through the day or something like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'll just say this: if you're still listening out there, you're faced with a choice, kids. You can become, a little wussy SJW girly man crying about everything, or you could start listening to this guy's channel and become like me, like Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse. Someone punches me in the arm, like pain don't hurt, please. So choice is yours, kids. You want to continue on in sorrow and anguish, go for it. But if you want to get a hold of yourself, grow up and become a man's man or a woman's man, start listening to his channel and make a go of things. You want to say goodbye, Mr. Tim?
Thank you, guys. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate you guys inviting me on, and we'll be in contact.
Yeah, we'll do this again soon. This was fun. This was really fun.
Yeah,
all absolutely. Right. Good night to all. And